Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Hemmings Hot Rod BBQ podcast. With me today is the co-founder of the Hemmings Hot Rod BBQ podcast, Mr. Dan Stoner. Dan, how you doing, bud?
Not bad, dude. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right, man.
Yeah.
I want to say I'm probably doing a little better than you,
Yeah,
only
I was gonna
because
say,
of,
like, how do you really want the answer? Or everyone's like,
yeah,
how you doing, man? I'm like, fine, or like, it's fine. No one really wants the answer to that
no,
question.
no, they don't. They don't want the follow-up conversation and get into it. But today, we're following up on the how
We're
you
definitely doing
doing
it.
because it's an interesting story, particularly because for those that don't know, Mr. Stoner, hot rodder extraordinaire, but in his garage, he has one car that is very special for a number of reasons. It is a little of 1952, if I'm not mistaken,
You're right. Yep.
Henry J. Now,
Yes.
Dan, for those that don't know what a Henry J is, Dan is about to give you a little history lesson. So, Dan, take it away.
Yeah. Yeah. So in 1952, when this car came out in 51 originally, but the Henry J was named after one of the co-founders of the Kaiser Fraser Corporation. And if you're anywhere on the West Coast or even close to the West Coast, if you've heard of Kaiser
Oh,
Permanente,
yeah.
right?
Oh, is
The
that the same?
It's the same one. So the
No
Kaiser
way.
in Kaiser Permanente Medical, is Henry J. Kaiser.
Okay.
And after he was really well known for, I mean, being a robber baron billionaire, but he also was known first and foremost for building Liberty ships during World War
Mm,
II. And he became really well known for figuring out the production process so that they could actually crank out one Liberty ship per day, which was this
oh,
huge thing,
wow.
right? Yeah. So after the war, he gets into cars and he's like, "Hey, I mastered everything else. Why not cars?" Right?
Right.
And that's usually the kiss of death anyway when someone says something like
Yeah.
that. But he figured he was so good at everything else, might as well get this would be easy. So he gets into corporate bed with this guy named Fraser, who also had cars and was designing and building them pre-war and then right after the war.
Okay.
And Kaiser Fraser was born. Anyway, in the early 50s, they decided that a compact, cheap,
Yeah.
economic car would be a good idea. That was not really thought about right after the war, and
Right.
this would be a good idea, right? So he starts building these really cheap Henry J's, and it's like a fastback. It's the very first ones didn't even have a trunk lid. Then in later
Really?
51, they had a trunk lid. Um, but everything was an option. These things didn't come with a heater. They didn't come with a radio. They didn't come with
Really?
signals. It was literally just this bare bones basic car. They didn't even come with upholstery
Oh,
or
wow.
carpeting inside.
Okay.
They came with rubber floor mats, right? So this thing was cheap.
Yeah.
And he borrowed, this is important for the story. He borrowed Jeep, the Willys 134 cubic inch four banger flathead for this
Wow.
job, right? You can get this four banger, which made I think like 17 horsepower, or you could
Right.
get like the six cylinder, which was a little bit more. But that's what these things came with. So these Henry J's were really light. They were
Yeah.
fairly small for the
Yeah.
for the era. And if you ever hear about a Henry J these days, it's probably because you've seen or heard about a dragster, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, most of the Henry J's that I've seen, and the interesting part is it's actually quite a good looking little car.
Right.
Like it really is a cute little car. But you see them nowadays, like I see them at Sonoma all the time, but they're gassers. They're
Yeah.
straight axle gassers.
Yep.
And
And
it,
usually that's just it's another frame. Sometimes a lot of guys had figured out that you can actually bolt straight up lower a Henry J body down over a Chevy S10
oh, really?
rolling chassis, and it fits right in. It fits right up. And to the degree that without very much modification, even the dash fits in under
Interesting.
this body, which is
Yeah.
kind of interesting. But yeah, you're right. Usually they're gassers because they were
Yeah.
lightweight. They didn't
Short
cost.
wheelbase.
Yep, short wheelbase. And you could basically put another frame under it. You
Yeah.
could put a straight axle under the nose. You put like a big block or HEMI in it,
Yep.
and you can go drag racing with these things. And like I said, you don't really have to remove a whole lot of weight from
Right.
them. They're already pretty light. That's why you see most of them in gassers.
Okay. So now that we've gotten a little history on the Henry J, tell us about your Henry J because yours, well, because Dan's Henry J has a great story behind it and it's actually very special.
Yeah.
So go into that. Tell us the story of how you came into this Henry J and why it's important.
Yeah. So this particular Henry J was my dad's car, that he bought his first car right after high school. Now, my dad grew up as a farmer, and in 1956, when he was a senior in high school, when all his buddies were buying cars, he bought a tractor, a brand new Ford 860 tractor, right? And I even said to him when I was a kid, when I got my driver's license, I'm like, I grew up around this Henry J. It never ran. The last time it ran, I think, was like 1967, but it had been sitting in the barn the whole time, and it just sat there, right? I
Yeah.
was born in 70, and I never saw this thing run. It just sat, right?
Right.
And fire engine red. And I even said to my dad, like, hey, why did you buy a tractor in high school and not
Yeah.
a car? And he's like, well, because you can't make any money on a car. I'm like, well, that's because you weren't drag racing, right? But like,
Right.
so he was that much of a farmer. So he bought this thing as his first car after high school, and he never got rid of it. And his little sister, my aunt, made a deal with him when she went to college later on and said, hey, I want to borrow the car. And my dad said, you can borrow it, but the deal is you got to get it repainted. So this is like 1962. And at
Okay.
the time, the stock color was this really kind of neat, like a warm robin's egg blue. It's like a neat color.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, so the story as I heard it was, she came home from her first semester of college, came home for Thanksgiving in this car, and she had taken it to like back in those days,
Earl
an
Shive.
early Earl Shive. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think for like $15. She got this thing hosed down in fire. And my dad about fell over when he saw it, but it's been that color ever since.
Oh
It's been
wow.
that color ever since. So I always wanted the car. I started taking it apart in 1986 when I was 16, and never put it back together again, because that's what I do. Uh,
16.
yeah, I
Yeah.
like to take everything apart and never put it back together. So there was like lawnmowers and all kinds of, weed whacker,
Yeah.
long trail of tears of me pulling stuff apart and never putting it back together again, right? So it just sat and sat and sat. Finally, the folks sell the farm. I had been living in Pennsylvania. I'd been living out here
Okay.
in California. And when they sold the farm, they're like, Dad said, do you want the car? And I said, yeah, I want the car. So he and my mom put it on a trailer and pulled it out here to California and left
Wow.
it with me.
They
So
drove it out?
they pulled it behind on a trailer.
No, no, no. But I mean, they drove and then yanked
Yeah,
out from
yeah,
all.
they drove.
Wow.
Yeah, they hooked it. They put that thing on a trailer and pulled it behind the pickup truck and pulled it out here to California.
No
And
shit.
that's what
Wow.
they do. They drive. They don't like to fly. They like to drive. They
Yeah.
like to take a month to come across the country because.
Okay.
So they did that. I've had it ever since. And finally, my dad is now 84, and I thought,
Yeah.
I need to put this thing back together again, get off my butt, put
Yeah.
everything aside for a minute, put this thing back together again, and then I want to like bring it back to him in Pennsylvania,
Sure.
and I want to go get ice cream with him in it, right? Like
Right.
that was the goal. Go get ice cream at the Foster
Yeah.
Freeze down the road from their retirement home, and that's the goal. But you got to do
Yeah.
this Herculean effort to get there, right?
Sure.
So, and of course, to your point earlier, Mike, my first thought was, oh yeah, this thing's getting a nail
Yeah,
head
right.
or
Yeah.
a
Of course. It's gonna be
Hemi.
gas. Yeah.
Yeah, gas. I got a 354 Hemi just waiting for something. I
Yep.
got a weird 1 year like Pontiac 370 that I could, I got all these ideas. I got a small block Ford. I had a little 302 that I was going to
Yeah.
put. And my dad goes, yeah, one more thing. I don't want you hot rodding that thing. I'm like, come on, man.
And I love the fact that like you're in your 50s and you still go, fine, Dad, I won't do it because you said so.
Come on. Yeah. Exactly. Dude, that is exactly what happened too. Like, come on. So, all right. So now it's got it. This one has like the little
Yeah.
four-cylinder flathead in it, right? And like I said, you can carry it's it's about the size of a Harley V twin. So you can actually pick it up. I've actually picked it up.
Yeah.
It's that small. You can actually pick it up and carry it around. So it's like, all right. So, that's when I was painfully reminded that it costs just as much to rebuild a big block Ford as it does to
Yeah.
rebuild a
68
134 cubic
horsepower.
inch. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Lawnmower engine. But I thought, okay, I'll do that. Right. So one of the things that I had said to myself was, maybe what I need to do, and this obviously, by the way, this is just to justify my actions. I was like,
Yeah.
I'm going to make this car a little bit dad and a little bit me,
Yeah.
right? Well, that was just to justify my just
You had to put your rubber
determination.
stamp on it.
I
Yeah.
got to warm this thing up a little bit. I got to do something to make this thing a little cooler,
Yeah.
It's a cool car as it is, but I need to do something to it. So I thought, all right, what if my dad was a hot rodder in 1956? Like if he really was
Yeah.
the hot rodder that I thought he might have been, he wasn't. If there's really a version of him that was a hot rodder, what would a 16-year-old kid have done
Yeah.
in 1956 with a barely used
Right.
1952 Henry J, right?
Right.
And so I'm going to surprise him with some of these things. So anyone who's listening to this podcast, do not tell my dad about anything. This is between us, okay,
Right. Of
everybody. This
course.
is between you got a pinky swear that you're not going to tell my dad, but I'm going to fill you in on what I'm doing here because I haven't told anyone else yet.
Right.
So I found like a kind of a rare two-pot intake for it, an aluminum two-pot intake called a Darland, which is the brand name of it. It came with a one-barrel Carter YF
Oh my
carburetor.
God.
Now I have two matching Carter YF carbs. I actually put the carbs in my carry-on, brought them to Vermont to have Junior go through them. You should have seen me go through TSA with those things, man.
Yeah.
This girl
The hell is this?
at Newark, New Jersey with a bunch of braids. She was like, and nails this long. She's like, excuse me, can you step over here to the side, sir? I'm like,
Yeah.
right. So I had him go through those and rebuild those carbs for me. And it's got like a custom header on it.
Yep.
It's got this really early, rare finned aluminum head.
Oh, that's cool.
Built by Vic Hickey. And
Oh,
if you
that's
heard
cool.
about Vic Hickey, yeah, like Hickey was known for Chevy off-road
Yeah.
performance, right?
Right.
And he also designed like the lunar lander rover mobile that went right.
Yep.
But he all before he became the Chevy off-road guy, he was doing Willys off-road stuff for like these post-war Jeeps.
Yeah.
And this motor this a little aluminum head was something that he designed in like 49, maybe
Huh.
50,
Okay.
something like that. So it's really cool. I've never seen another one in person. Every once in a while you'll see somebody has one online, but you never see them.
Well, what I think is amazing about this, like you talk about the car and how much you want to get it done, but you're using, and here's the part. When enthusiasts have cars like this, whether they're 10 years old or whether they're 70 years old, we talk about them like they're almost new because you interact with them, whether you're moving them around the garage or working on them or buying parts for them. These are true antiques. This is a 70-year-old car,
Yeah, you're right.
right?
With all the
72-year-old car
original stuff. Yeah,
with
this is
all
not
its
like
original stuff. This
mhm.
is, I mean, this, so when you talk about, yeah, I picked up this head and I picked up this stuff, every single piece of this car is almost like unobtainium because it is so old. And
You're right.
and it's hard for enthusiasts to get it in their head. Like I look at stuff, like I think of cars now that I'm like, oh, that's probably, if I see it on the street, I'm like, well, that Camaro's probably like, I don't know, 10, 12 years old. It's like 34 years
Yeah,
old. And
right,
I'm
right.
like, shit.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Tears for Fears was 35 years ago now, Mike. Come
I
on.
know.
You know what I
Dude.
mean?
But it's interesting because when you talk about like the Vikiki stuff and you say, well, he designed this in 49.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
World War II ended in, what, 44 or
40,
whatever it was?
45. Yeah. I mean,
45. So like,
yeah. Right. Right. And but to your point too, you bring up a really good point. Like This car had never been fully ever taken apart. I had pulled the front nose off the thing and the grill, but other than that, I
Well,
mean, it still had air in the tires from 1965.
well,
You
let
know,
me ask you, when did your dad stop driving the car?
67. Well, he stopped driving it in like 65, 66. And then what he would do is go out to the barn and just fire it up and just let it idle once a year,
Yeah.
just so that, just so that the valve train
Yeah.
kept lubricated, sorta, and
But
the pistons didn't get stuck.
was he driving like on the farm, like pickup trucks and stuff like that? The Henry J just didn't have a place. Is that really what it came down to?
It was one of those things that he just there were enough other things going on that, and plus he was into really restoring antique tractors. So anything old, it
Yeah.
was a tractor, or like my first car was a 60 Dodge Matador that then I got into that, but the Henry J always just sat. It was
Right.
just always
Interesting.
back in the corner and
Yeah.
didn't really worry about it, and it had this weird little motor in it. You could, as small as that car is, you could literally step inside the engine compartment behind
Yeah.
the motor, right? It's just this. So I just never worried about it until I said, "Yeah, I want the car." When they were getting ready to sell
Right.
the farm, you
Right.
know.
So you have the car now, and like you said, you wanted to make it a combination of a little bit of you
Yeah,
melded with what your dad might do if he was a hot rodder, right?
right, right.
And so you were going to embark on this trip.
Yes. So
So walk
yeah.
us through that a little bit.
So the whole plan behind this was that I would record every bit of this, every bit of
Yeah.
this journey, whether it was from the moment I started really rebuilding the thing all the way to putting it up on a trailer. Because originally I thought I was going to drive it back across the country.
Hmm.
And my wife was like, yeah, by yourself forever, So,
Yeah.
right. So I was like, that was going to be a no-go. But I thought, well, we'll at least trailer it behind, a truck, and
Yeah.
we'll just drive it across country. Right. So the plan was to record the entire trip because you see a lot of that on YouTube. And I was like, well, we could do this. I mean, this
Sure.
doesn't seem like rocket science. And so we were getting ready to do this, and just like any old car or anybody who's doing this kind of thing, whether it's just for a car show or for some event that you want to bring the car out to and debut it, you're always doing the thrash right up until the end. So it's like this thing took 10 years and the last 36 hours to build.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Like, that's always the way it goes.
Of
And
course.
so the day before we're getting ready to leave, I'd already, rented I got the trailer, we got, we've got the dog's got 17 new bow ties that he's going to
Right.
wear across the country on his trip. We got everything figured out. And the day before we were getting ready to leave, we're turning the thing over, starting it for the very first time, because that's how smart I am. It's like, we're going to fire this thing for the very first time 12 hours before we leave.
Of course. Yeah.
Right.
It's
And it
fine.
hasn't been, and of course, this motor has not started or run since 1967, but why
Fine.
not? The night
It's
before.
fine. It'll be fine.
It's all gonna be fine.
Right.
So we're turning the thing over, the starter's working. By mind you, I kept the 6-volt system. So and it's also in those years, Henry J's all had positive ground 6-volt electrical systems. So
Okay.
the positive cable on the battery was actually the ground on this thing,
Wow.
which
Okay.
is, I never understood exactly why that is and why they decided to do that, but that's what this thing is. Which just means really that you got to think a little bit more than you normally would when you're rewiring everything. Like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, this is so it's just not starting. It's not firing up. And we're like, what is going on with this thing? And finally, we pull one of the number 4 spark plug out, and the ground strap electrode is
Hmm.
mashed down against the center
Ooh.
electrode. I'm like, oh no,
Something's hitting.
something's hitting. And if you've ever seen this before, or you've dealt any at all with motors, that is not that's probably going to be a big deal.
Yeah.
As soon as I saw that, I was like, okay, time to unwind this trip, unravel everything. Okay,
Yeah.
call off cancel the hotel reservations, return
Yeah.
the rental trailer. Just everything's done because this car ain't leaving anytime,
Right.
right? So that was literally last Friday.
Oh, jeez.
So now we've figured out, like, probably that that aftermarket kind of rare as hen's teeth aluminum hickey head.
Yeah.
The the floor of the spark plug where
Yeah.
it's supposed to be twisted is probably more shallow than a stock head.
Now, do you
On
still have the stock head?
I do. Yeah, I still have the stock head, and that's perfectly fine as well. And if you know anything about flatheads, it's not that the piston's hitting this spark plug, it's the valves.
Right. Okay.
So then you got to wonder, like, okay, well, if the valves are hitting, they're a little more delicate than a piston. So did we hurt the valves?
Right.
And of course, it's all four cylinders that's hitting. When I had the engine rebuilt, is it a taller, more duration and lift cam? Like, I just don't. We're just
Well, let
kind
me
of,
ask you, Dan, because
yeah,
again, you're talking about an engine that's 70 years old, right?
yeah.
So is it, and I mean, and you yourself know a great deal about these engines and things like
Well,
that, but
let's
is
not go
it,
crazy.
well, I mean, more than the majority.
Yeah,
Is it difficult now to find people who are still have experience with these things?
a great
Like,
point.
is it, because a lot of people are aging out, right? Like the masters, the engine masters were, you 15, I mean, 30 years ago, you could find somebody to rebuild a flathead with their eyes closed.
Right.
But
Right.
now people are aging out. So is it becoming difficult to find people with the expertise?
It is in some cases. Like if you're just building a race of gentlemen flat V8 Ford flathead, there's an aftermarket for those things.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people under the age of 100 still building those, right? Still building those motors, and they're kind of
Yeah,
neat. With a motor like this one, like the the theoretics behind the motor are all the same, but
sure.
specifics of a Willys 134 cubic inch L head flathead motor, there aren't that many of those people
Right.
around who are even remotely interested in these things, right?
Right.
So luckily for us, and what I've kind of was tickled and pleased to find out was that I literally, Mike, and this was part of the story I'm doing too. I literally went to the a copy of Hemmings
Huh.
Motor, like and I was like, I'll bet you there's somebody in this
Yeah.
book, hidden away somewhere in here, that actually knows something about that.
Yeah.
And sure enough, I found a whole host of like Willys, and not so much Henry J people, but
Yeah.
Willys like drivetrain people who are
That's
really into.
amazing.
Yeah,
That's
it's
amazing.
sort of what I've come to realize is that the Willys banger guys or scene is sort of like the Ren Fair of the automotive.
Mm.
These guys, these guys are
Yeah.
like World War II reenactment guys, and
Right.
stuff. Like they're getting like the Jeep in a crate.
In a crate,
They're
put
dropped
it
out of a
together in, yeah,
B-17 and
15
put it
minutes.
together. Yeah, yeah, they're those guys, right? And there's
Yep.
some younger guys doing this stuff too, and they're all dressing up and hello sailor, like that kind of stuff, right? But they're into these things. So I found a whole host I even found like a company, like a legacy Hemmings advertiser. It's this guy and his family who have um an electrical, kind of like an electric, like a redesigned like basically wiring kit or wiring harness company called YNZ, and they actually like literally pulled like a bunch of schematics off the shelf and kind of blew the dust off. And they're like, "Yeah, we'll make you one." And they actually made me a brand new wiring harness with all the correct color.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, like the fabric woven
Wow.
wires with the right
Yeah.
with the right fittings on the end, and the connectors that I've never seen. Like that stuff is post
You know what,
war.
dude? Well, it's so amazing to me that, I mean, Hemmings as a resource is astonishing,
Yeah, it
right?
really
Because
is.
and to your point, every time I'm like, oh God, I really can't find information on this, whatever the case is, I always seem to go back to Hemmings and I'm like, we
Yeah,
gotta have something. And inevitably, there's a huge article or a huge thing or a resource, and I'm like, son of a
crazy.
bitch.
And they
I mean,
actually, yeah.
and they're there.
And here's the other thing too, Mike. I found, and not that I'm advertising this for Hemmings, because it's really just part of it's really an authentic and
Yeah.
real part of the story. But that 400 page Hemmings Motor News, there's stuff trapped in there in those pages that you won't find online. They're not,
No.
these people aren't advertising online. It's crazy how much stuff is in there.
Yeah.
And when I was paging through Hemmings, like looking for all this stuff in the, I kid you not, I will be the first to admit I actually did this. I found myself because it's if you open up Hemmings, it's a phone book, right? And there's
Right, of
all these
course.
like crazy listings. I found myself going trying to enlarge the
I,
page so I could see the list
right.
a little bit more clearly. But yeah, there people are out there, and just like anything else, when you really nerd out on one
Yeah.
specific, very narrowly focused section of this world, you'll find it just kind of opens up when you find it. But that's where I found the stuff.
I love the fact that people are still so into these little niche cars and these models,
Yeah.
but even more importantly, see the importance of keeping them on the road, right? Because the fact that, like my buddy Sean, he's the gentleman that redid my Charger, Sean Machado. He is an encyclopedia of knowledge on these cars.
Yeah.
He knows every bolt, every nut, every wire, everything. And it is so you almost look to the car gods and go, thank you for existing.
Oh
And
man.
thank you for putting the time in, and thank you for, really being that passionate, because what that does is that allows other enthusiasts to come into the hobby and be like, you know what? I know there's somebody as crazy as I am that wants to learn how to do this stuff. And
Right.
that this guy already knows everything. So
Yeah.
it boggles my mind. So what's the status of the J now?
So right now, it's like I said, it's all put together. Like chasing fittings and fasteners for
Mm,
this thing was just incredible. Just try to find a hardware store that has fittings that actually might fit, a 52 Henry J. I mean, you're looking for
yeah.
like 90-degree pipe to nipple. Sorry, I had to say that
Yeah.
out loud. But like pipe to nipple, and that
Yeah.
doesn't work. And it's 5/8 to half inch, and I mean all
Yeah.
these crazy fittings that just you can't find. So right now we got all that stuff done, and now everything's pretty much ready to go, except for this major problem. So the good news is that all of the hard part of finding the different fittings and the
Yeah.
fasteners and all that stuff, we got all that stuff finally,
Mm,
right? Now it's a matter of literally just figuring out that valve and spark plug clearance issue,
okay.
which while it's a major issue to solve, it's a major problem to solve, it ain't the end of the world. Like we didn't break anything, we just don't
Hmm.
know what's causing this yet. And
Right.
is it as easy as just shimming the spark plugs to get the spark plugs up a little bit more in the combustion chamber? Is it really
Right.
like a cam problem? Like we just don't know what that is yet. I don't think it's
Sure.
a cam. So now we're just trying to figure that out.
Okay.
And once we do, I don't think, knock on wood, is going to be much of an issue getting the rest of the project finished. That's
Okay.
the major last thing. Yeah.
Now let me ask, what transmission does this car run?
It's got this little like three on the tree stock Willys uh
Really?
3-speed transmission. Yeah. So like the drivetrain, the good news is there were like 8 zillion of those Willys Jeeps built for the war,
Yeah.
and it's not that difficult to find transmission parts and things like that. It's
Okay.
again, it's 70-year-old technology, but
Yeah.
that we freshly rebuilt that transmission. The rear end is I don't know, it's like a Dana 23 or something like that.
Yeah.
Little spindly rear end. Um, it's like so it's got all this space in the rear. I've got like 7-inch, these little skinny 7-inch tires on the back. I actually okay, here's another thing, everybody. Do not tell my dad. But I actually got Rich over at Raider Wheels and Tire in Jersey. I got him to send me. He's the only guy who makes a 7-inch cheater slick. So I got cheater slicks on the back of this thing. My dad is going to have a fit when he sees it. I'm surprised. He knows the car is coming, but he doesn't know he doesn't know that stuff. So
So okay, so now what's the plan? Like you're gonna figure out the head,
yeah,
get that back on, crank it, make sure it starts and runs,
yep.
and then will you revisit the road trip, strap it down to a
Yes.
trailer,
We'll
and
do
then hit
that
the road again?
next spring. We'll do it because I don't want to drive that thing across the country in the summer. This
Yeah.
fall, you and I are busy. We got,
Yeah, we're running.
Christmas show and all this other stuff coming up. So I think about a little less than a year from now, we'll get I'll get it back on the road. I'll actually have it like registered and titled. I'll get a neat
Yeah.
black plate, California black plate, maybe
Yep.
customize that. And
Sure.
put all the final little touches on it, maybe do a new rubber mat for the floor, like
Yeah.
figure out some of the stuff I wasn't planning on doing at all, just to
Right.
get the car to him.
Right.
So
Ah, dude.
that'll be fun.
That's so cool. I mean, so here's the thing. So once you get that, we're gonna have to revisit this once the head comes
Yeah,
back and you get this thing
yeah.
cranked because I'm sure people are gonna want to know. I want to know. Um, and then is the plan to, repaint the car? Is the plan to like
Ah,
what's your overall
okay.
goal?
So here's another thing that I'm going to surprise Dad with. And so again, nobody can tell him this. This is a surprise, you guys, all of you. If you ever see my dad at the chicken barbecue at the Brethren home in Cross Keys, Pennsylvania, don't tell him about this. So what that red paint's still on the car, right?
Hmm.
At one of our partners, one of our brands that we work with, is this guy who has some of you may have heard about this. It is a media blasting process that uses dry ice.
Oh yeah, sure, of course.
Have you heard about this?
Oh
And a
yeah, of
lot of
course.
times you'll feel like people use it to clean, but the great news about this stuff is that you don't have to tape up the plastic. You don't have to
Huh,
work
it's
up
just
the
water.
glass. It's just water. So you don't even have to like any rubber trim. Like it apparently doesn't damage anything like
No,
that.
it's fine.
Really gentle, but also really effective. So as part of this trip, we're going to make a detour and go down to Florida. Scott Ailes has a company called Dryce, and we're going to just see. We're going to take his process to this car, and that blue paint. All you have to do is scratch it or put it like I've done,
Yeah.
put duct tape on the paint, and you pull that off, rip it off like a band-aid, and that blue paint's right underneath the surface. So we're gonna see if we can actually like gently remove that red paint to reveal the original blue underneath it. My dad hasn't seen the original color since 1962.
Wow.
So I'm hoping that we can pull that off.
Ah,
And
what a cool thing, Dan.
yeah,
So
it'd be so cool.
this is very, very cool. I mean, that's something that I think he'll probably just love when he sees. He'll probably be like, "What?" He's either gonna be like, "This is the greatest thing," or "What the hell did you do to my car?"
That's I'm kind of thinking like there's going to be an eye roll. There's going to be, I get the full middle, I get the first and middle name, the full deal.
Yeah.
There'll probably be a little bit of that. I'm hoping that at this age he just thinks it's funny. Let's just hope. Because here I am 53 years old, I'm still worried about it.
Right, of course, of course. Well,
All of a sudden
you
I'm
can,
16 again, right? Like
well, dude, I mean, listen, anybody, it doesn't matter what our age is, your dad goes, "What are you doing?" You go, "Oh, shit." You
dude,
know?
I'm still worried about like handing him the tools the right way. You know what I mean? Like I just
Yeah.
worry about that.
Yeah. Well,
Worry
that's the
about
thing. I mean, listen, the fact of the matter is if your dad was a farmer, that man could probably take anything apart and rebuild it with his eyes closed.
That's
You know,
really true. That's really
I mean, that's the one thing that I know about farmers are that they are some of the like if there's ever some kind of apocalypse, partner me with a farmer, I know I'm going to make it because they
oh
can
man.
fix anything.
There
Anything.
are two things that I know to be true about farmers. No such thing as an atheist farmer, and they can fix anything, right? This is the way it always goes. And I will tell you another thing that's funny about that. Dad has not, I know for a fact, like I said, he hasn't seen the car in over 10 years since I've had it, but I know he has not touched that car other than using it to pile things on top of for the last 50, right?
Wow.
But when I got it out here, we were talking about it, and once I finally tore into it and told him we were going to bring it back, he's like, I forget what he had asked me. He asked me something about, do I have it insured or do I have it registered yet? And I said no. He's like, well, look, I know there's like 37,412 miles on that car. I'm like, wait a minute, what? And sure enough, that's what the odometer says.
Wow.
And he knows
Wow.
exact things like he knows exactly like the spark plug. It's an Autolite 3JA. I'm like, what? Like how like he just remembers everything, like weird little details about that car
Yeah.
that he has not thought about in 50 or seen in 50 plus years. Yeah.
Ah, dude, what a cool story. This is
Yeah.
really cool. So, all right, so then you're gonna as soon as you get the head back, you got to come back on. We got to talk about it more, and
Yeah.
then once it's ready for the big trip to go across country, this is a story, and I love the fact that you're gonna film a series on it.
Yeah.
That you're gonna bring it to us and show everybody. This is a fun project, dude.
It'll
This is
be cool,
very
dude. And like I said, in the video too, I've been recording all this. Like I show people, like I show you how to use a copy of Hemmings to go through it and go, okay, if you need weird little arcane parts that you can't find anymore, here's where you
Yeah.
find it. And here's this guy in Sheboygan who has a whole barn full of stuff. And you could find, like, guys were like, out of the, these guys were coming out of the woodwork. Like, and here's the other thing I found out about Henry J's. They're kind of like, Henry J owners are like Edsel owners. Like, you don't just own one, you own seven for some
Right.
reason, right?
Right.
So this guy, if a guy has a Henry J, especially a stock one, which you don't see very many of, as to your point earlier, they've got four in the back 40, and you're like, oh, so you need clutch rods? Hold on a minute. And
Right.
you call them and they're like, absolutely, I've got this and that. And they say, well, do you need a couple extra things? So while I'm there, I might as well pull the whatever. I go, sure. And then you talk about price and you're like, look, I'm gonna have to, Dan, I'm sorry, but you're gonna have to pay me for some of my time to go back on the and
Right.
be able to get this stuff too. I go, yeah, I get it. I go, what are we talking about here? And he's like, well, if you're doing the clutch rods and with, I'll throw in some headlight rings and maybe like the one of the buttons that moves the seat back and forth and a couple other things. But look, I'm gonna need like 23, $24 for this stuff. I'm like,
Yeah.
you go, and he was like, all right. I mean, look, that's fair.
Yeah. If that's what we have to do, that's
I
what we'll
need to,
do.
I know you need to stay in the good graces of the Lutheran Church on Sunday morning. So let's be fair about this. I understand.
Well, Dan, thank you for coming on again and
Right
just
on,
telling us
dude.
about the Henry J. This is so great. I'm so looking forward to seeing how the story plays itself out.
Dude, that makes two of us.
Yeah. So, and I mean, listen, to Dan's point, Hemmings is an astounding resource for stuff like this. Whether,
Crazy.
it really, really is. I mean, if we don't have it, it doesn't exist,
Yeah, go
right?
find the book. Go get the book. Go to your Barnes and Noble or subscribe to it. I mean,
Yep.
it's in the I like I said, I grew up around that magazine like a bunch of us have, but I was like, yeah, whatever. Like it's cool, but no, there's some stuff in there that if you just take the time to look, and like I said, if you're gonna do the
Yeah.
thing,
Try to make it bigger.
yeah, it's amazing. And what's locked in those pages is not only the parts and stuff, but this amazing group of people, like
Yeah.
that are all connected by this book that's been around since 54. And it is an entire network that
Yeah.
I guess I just never, I guess I always took it for granted. Like I'm like, oh yeah,
Right.
they'll always be there. They're not always going to be there. But the
Right.
fact that I actually tapped into that resource and like dug into that network and everybody's willing to help you,
Pretty
it's
cool.
yeah, it really is.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, Dan, thanks again for coming on. We will
Thank
talk
you.
to you very soon. And guys, like I said, check out the Hemmings Classifieds if you're looking for your first classic, which, by the way, I'm going to throw this little matzo ball out there. Coming up, Dan is actually going to be hosting a show called My First Classic. That's going to be coming a little later this year. And that show is going to have Dan taking you through the car buying process to help anybody out there that's never
Right.
been in the hobby get into the hobby, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So we're very much looking forward to getting that show underway. We're going to actually, in fact, after this podcast, we have a couple of calls because this is
Yeah.
going to be happening soon. We'll have more on that show, as it comes up, probably, I want to say third quarter or so. We're going to pop that
Yeah,
out.
you're right.
But keep an eye out for My First Classic. We also have Repair to Rev, which is a brand new father-daughter show that's coming out. God, we just go to the Hemmings YouTube channel, like and subscribe because we got a ton of content. And like, subscribe to the magazines and
Yeah.
that's
And
it.
remember, don't anyone tell my dad about this. This is
Right.
between us.
Right.
Do not ruin the surprise.
Right. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the barbecue. Thanks for listening, folks. And again, please subscribe to the Hot Rod BBQ podcast. If you're on Spotify, check us out there. Subscribe to it on iTunes. And if you are going to go to YouTube, make sure you go to the Hot Rod BBQ podcast and hit that subscribe button, and we'll come to you every week.